right, so did you know that privileged attack leads to 88% of the networks getting compromised? It's a fairly high number, so what's the solution? Either unplug all your devices, or basically take away all privileged permissions, right? So then what will happen? Nothing will work in your organization. So that's not a choice that you can actually do in your organization. And then I have a third interesting stat. It says it takes about 75% to actually detect low and slow attacks. So something different, but the meaning is the same. This stat is very close to me, and I'll tell you why. Because Mandiant, if we all know, is one of the leading providers for stats and analytics. And I was with FireEye when Mandiant got acquired. So we actually flew there, and then the acquisition happened at Mandiant, which is about 2014, Jan of 2014. Jan 9, 2014, to be exact. All right, so we'll go forward. I don't know why it's being blanked out. Maybe it's getting tired too. All right, so if you basically look at the stat, I don't know how many of you are stressed out. I don't see any people stressed out. Maybe they're waiting for wine and beer, which is going to happen after the session. You basically have to think about different ways to detect things in your organization, right? So if you have traditional technologies, which everyone has in the organization, whether you have SIEM, you'll think about what can I do next, right? Do I move to Splunk or do I do SIEM++? If you have, let's say, network-based technologies, you will think of what can I do next? If you think about how firewall evolves, right? I mean, pure ACLs, and then they moved into some user ID stuff, then they went into app ID stuff and stuff like that. But now it's all about network traffic and analytics, right? If you have traditional endpoint technologies, one thing that was very funny with traditional endpoint is, I don't know if you remember, I was at RSA, and then just a report came out by NSS which says CrowdStrike actually needs to use a restraining order to stop malware, which was pretty funny to me. CrowdStrike actually filed a lawsuit against NSS about that because it was pretty humiliating for them. Anyways, if you have an endpoint technology, you're looking at EDR, right? That's the next evolution. If you have DLP technologies, you're looking at data exfiltration analytics. So it's all about analytics at this point in time, which is the buzzword, the keyword. But hopefully in your portfolio, you at least should have something on the analytics side, right? Whether it be network-based analytics, whether it be data exfiltration-based analytics, so whatever type of analytics you think is more relevant to you. If I have to guess, I don't think anyone is from the IAM team here. Very few people, maybe none. But if you are, then identity analytics is also the next big wave. I talk about waves a little more than others because my background is startups. I always go in startups and I always try to get acquired by a big company. So that's how I came to Splunk too. So for me, waves are interesting things. All right, so if you think about behavior, right? So behavior is a central element in any sort of analytics, whether you're looking at network and analyzing traffic, and then determining what's good, what's bad, or if you're looking at endpoint technology, identifying processes, services, file movement, file access, and stuff like that, identifying deviations of normal behavior or something. Or if you're just looking at users by themselves or privileged IDs by themselves, right? Accounts by themselves, and finding like, why is this guy doing privileged operations when nobody else is doing in the organization? So it's all about analyzing different entities. And this is what behavior detection is, right? It's basically identifying what's normal, which is the next slide. The clicker is horrible. I don't know why it's not moving ahead. Click on ahead? Pointed at Mac. Okay. Windows actually it works without the again, I'm just kidding. All right, so what's behavior analytics? Then before I go into that, so this is basically Caspida. So Caspida was bought by Splunk, which is UBA, which now we call Splunk UBA, back into 2014. So it's almost 2 years since I've been with Splunk. The day the acquisition happened, Match.com was very scared about this acquisition because we were all talking about behavior analytics, right? So they thought like, we are the next matchmaking company that Splunk has acquired. But that's not the case. Behavior analytics is basically learning from entity's activity, calling that as normal, and then finding deviations from a normal, right? And then all these deviations are called anomalies, and you try and stitch those anomalies into threads. And then what is an entity? So entity can be a user, it can be a service account, it can be a device, it can be file, it can be network, it can be data, it can be anything in your organization. Going back to my joke of Match.com, anyone on Match.com? No? Everyone is happily married? I actually meant is everyone happily living or married?
It's all Tinder.
It's all, Tinder, yeah, that's odd. Unfortunately, I've crossed my millennium age, so I'm on the old side, so I don't have an account on Tinder, but I wish I had one. Anyways, all right, this thing sucks. All right. So what's actually relevant to you? So if I'm a customer, you'll now see my sales pitch. If I'm a customer, what you said is not relevant to me. What's relevant to me are three different things in an organization, right? It's basically the use cases that a vendor is going to solve for you. The second thing is what data services are needed to solve those use cases. And third is what are the techniques that you can employ. So if you go into, oh, thank you, lady. If you go into the use cases side, there are 5 foundational use cases. So if ever you think about, now I remember Robert Hartwig, I'm a big fan of his. I hope he lets me drive his $1.6 million Ferrari, but I don't think he'll ever do. But if you think about use cases, there are 5 broad buckets, right? Even if you have 1,000 use cases, you can basically classify them in these 5 buckets. The first is you have to detect compromised users or credentials in your account. You have to detect data exfiltration in your organization. You have to detect if there are compromised endpoints in your organization. You have to detect if there is, and this is a new segment, may not be applicable to all of you, but if you go to the public sector or financials, it's very evident that they exclusively have programs to identify insiders in the organization. We are in Silicon Valley, so we feel like every employee is great. Nobody takes any stuff from the organization, but that's not true, right? But anyways, identifying insider views or identifying privileged account views. And the last thing, which is very critical, and the first 2 sessions talked about hunting, right? If you think about hunting, it's actually providing what sort of contextual information can you provide. So can your tool provide any sort of context to basically either speed up my incident investigation, maybe automate the manual processes that I have in place and stuff like that. So if you think about any of the use cases, they actually will fall in any of these 5 buckets. If you now go on to the data source side, what data sources are needed? Now, it just depends, right? Depending on what use case are you interested in. If you're interested in endpoint-centric use cases, then you need endpoint data. If you're interested in identity-centric use cases, you need IAM data as well as sort of network data, right? So fundamentally, there are 6 broad categories. You need network logs, endpoint logs, application logs, any custom application logs if you have, cloud application logs,